Hi everyone, welcome back to Novel Nomad and welcome to my Reading Rush Readathon wrap up. Oh my goodness, I had to say that one slowly. But I had a really good reading rush. I didn't document it as much as I wanted to on Instagram stories. It was a huge week for me, work-wise, and I was just so focused on reading the book today. I forgot to Instagram story any of my progress, but I did a few little things, but not as much as I was planning or wanting to do. But I thought I would go through a really good wrap up now to show you all the amazing short books that I read over the Reading Rush week. Okay, so I managed to read 6 out of the 7 books that I was hoping to read during the week. I didn't get to do all 7, which was a bummer. I got partway through the 7th book, but I just ran out of time in the end. But I was still really proud that I got 6 out of 7. That was still a very good effort, and I had a lot of fun reading as I went. So first off, the book that I read that I wanted to read last year, and it was actually part of my Victober, and I managed to read this year, was Matilda by Mary Shelley. This was an incredibly interesting short work. It was almost like a short format of Frankenstein, not in the concept of creation, humanity, things like that, but more in the idea of how something morally corrupt happens quite early on, and you see how things go down in a downward spiral for the main character. And Matilda is quite interesting. She's her mother died when she was quite young, and because of her father's great love for her mother, he decided to leave her to the care of her aunt and swans off to recover from a broken heart. So Matilda grows up not knowing her father and always thinking that he's probably disappeared or he's died, and then suddenly he shows up, and they have a wonderful time together. The aunt dies, and he takes her to the family house down in further down south in England, but then things just go wrong. And after he captures a man trying to court her, the father starts to act very strangely towards Matilda, and she doesn't understand why, until the father basically says he has like a romantic obsession with her, and she immediately rejects it because it's like absolutely horrendous. But then he goes off and commits suicide, and then she's left alone in the world, and she's also left in a very severe illness as she was trying to chase after her father to prevent his suicide. But it was very interesting concept. It wasn't published until, I think, what was it, 80 years? For over a century this was suppressed, this story, because the idea of incest shocked the early Victorian society, and it was not something that was widely published. But it's still an interesting idea, an interesting introduction into Mary Shelley, and it's very slow in the second half. So I think I gave this about 3 stars. It was an interesting read, but nothing beats Frankenstein. Okay, so next I read The Prime of Mrs. Jean Brodie, and this was for the watch a movie or a TV adaptation of the book. I watched the Maggie Smith version of The Prime of Mrs. Jean Brodie, and she was fabulous as Jean Brodie. I really loved her, but it was done in the 60s, and the way the men or the male actors were portrayed as treating the women was a little bit horrible. She seemed she was a much stronger woman, a more independent woman. But yeah, I didn't like that in part of in the movie or the TV series, sorry, but in the book itself, Jean Brodie is a very fascinating character, and it just has this like melting pot of all these girls and what she imagines their futures to be and what she expects their futures to be, and they obviously don't follow that code, and it just deviates from this wonderful moment where Jean Brodie is the center of the Brodie girls' life, and how it quickly they become their own independent person, until of course Miss Jean Brodie is betrayed by one of her girls, and it's just interesting to see how that betrayal occurred, and also why that betrayal occurred, and if it was regretted later. It was really interesting, such a short book, and it was a really fascinating look at human psychology and development, early development of children as well. So really fascinating. Next, instead of reading A Room with a View by Ian Forster, I ended up reading Cheerful Weather for the Wedding by Julia Strachey. This is published by Persephone Books in this beautiful edition. They do have it in an all grey edition, but this is the Persephone Classics. And what I really loved about this book is that it symbolizes English upper middling class, I should say, concept that everything has to be chipper and well, even when, you know, emotions are messy, things are going wrong, you know, people are fighting, you know, their outfits look awful, the weather is dreadful. But, you know, if anyone asked how the day went, it's, oh, it was a wonderful day, it was cheerful weather for the wedding. And it's just this idea that that facade is something that has to be broken, and to get those real emotions across, because you're just denying the real passion and the real emotion of life. And it is done really, really well. I really like this because it was a bit of a jumble. It's just in the one day of this wedding, and you get all these complicated emotions coming into play, and it was just brilliant. I really loved it. I really highly recommend this one. But yeah, it was fabulous. So my book with the purple cover is definitely The Darling Buds of May by H.E. Bates. This is book number 1 in the Larrikin family series. I did enjoy this. It was something completely outrageously farcical, and something that I thought would have been such a hoot for the 1950s England, because I think comedic books probably would have been left to the magazines and publications like that. So to have this completely outrageous family that just enjoys each day as it comes and looks for the things that are perfect in life, and perfect out of each day, I think is lovely. And also that, you know, they don't really care about strict rules of society. They just know that it's going to be a good time, and as long as everyone's happy and well fed, that everyone's going to have a wonderful day. So next was a challenge to read a book in one spot, and I did it in one sitting, which was it was hard because I was making sure I paced myself out, kept hydrated, and it was On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. This is 20 Lessons from the 20th Century, and I thought this was absolutely amazing. It really highlights some political, humanitarian, social problems within society that occurred within the 20th century that are now being repeated. And of course, they happened on what was always considered the opposing side of the greater Western powers. And so to have this suddenly come into play within current society, and to have people saying, oh, this has never happened before, when in fact it has. History shows that it has, and these are just incredibly interesting lessons and it can be taken with you every day, because he doesn't speak about it on some great political level. He talks about the personal politics and how that really feeds into the greater politics of the society and of your country and of the world. And lastly, from my TBR that I did read is All Systems Red by Martha Wells. This was for the book featuring a non-human main character, and it was in fact a robot. Is the main character is like, it calls itself Murderbot because it has some genetic parts, but it's mostly a robot that's programmed to kill. But technically it's programmed for security reasons only. And this is such a great novella because something huge action-packed happens at the beginning, and then next minute they kind of look into the problem, and it turns out this crew that's exploring this new planet in space, they haven't been given all the information, and there's secret areas that the company that's bought the planet is not giving out. And of course there's another crew that's on the other side of the planet also checking out this new planet for, you know, minerals and resources, and they find out they're not getting any contact from them after this big event happens. So it is really action packed, and the ending was fantastic. It was really great. It goes into further books, but I'm definitely going to pick more of these up. Okay, so the book that I'm partly reading at the moment is The Girl of Ink and Stars by Kieran Millerwood Hardgrave, and I am enjoying this so far. It's quite interesting. It has that classic interesting society where a colonial power almost has come in and taken over, and they are dictating all the rules that are going on. And it starts off quite early. A girl gets murdered. Not that you notice, like a murder mystery almost, but it causes a curfew. So I'm still quite early into this, and it's quite an interesting read so far. I'm not sure what to feel for it entirely, and also how it would appeal best to middle grade readers. But yeah, otherwise it's quite interesting, a very interesting start to this book. And of course the book that I kind of swapped for another one was A Room with a View by Ian Forster. I will get around to reading this someday soon, hopefully. It is still quite small, it is still going to be a fun read, so hopefully it will pop up for another TBR readathon very soon. Alright, so they are all the amazing books that I read for Reading Rush Readathon. I hope you had a wonderful time if you did participate in the Reading Rush. I'm still going through the forum. I am so slow on catching up on those things, but I had such a good time. And let me know any books that you read in the last week of June, or if you did participate in Reading Rush, what books did you read for different challenges. So I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!